Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. To proceed, this is our 73rd lesson in the Ship of Salvation, Safinatun Najat. And these, again, are extra sections that are very relevant, related to zakat, that the translator, Allah reward him, added, and that are included in the commentary that is in the manner in which this book is typically taught, commentary of Ship of Salvation. So we're including them. This is section 36, Zakat al-Fitr, and you'll recall zakat in the sacred law definition is a name for what is paid due to wealth or persons. So you have zakat on wealth, zakatul mal, the zakat of wealth, and we covered the 6 types of wealth upon which zakat is due. And then there is also zakat al-badan, the zakat on persons, and that is zakat al-fitr, that the vast majority of us will pay after each Ramadan or during each Ramadan up to Eid al-Fitr prior, and it is recommended that it be paid prior to the Eid prayer, otherwise it is offensive. La ilaha illallah, zakat al-fitr is actually the original zakat that was legislated. Zakat was legislated in the 2nd year after the Hijrah, along with fasting Ramadan, and it was the first zakat that was actually prescribed was zakat al-fitr. And zakat al-fitr is or he says, section 36a, zakat fitr corresponds to 2.03 liters from the staple food stock of a specific locale. So what does that mean? Zakat al-fitr, in the view of the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school, and the Hanbali school of thought, among the Sunni schools, must be paid in food, not in the corresponding monetary value of food. May Allah reward him and have mercy upon them all. Imam Abu Hanifa allows that it be paid in a value of money and not specifically in food, though it would also be valid in his school that it be paid in food. So when he says 2.03 liters of the staple food stock, that means a staple grain, typically. So let's say there is an area where the staple is wheat. That means literally that we do a volumetric measure consisting of 2.03 liters or more of wheat per person. And incidentally, the Arabic term for that is saw, ending in ayn, and it's 4 muds. Arba amdad is a saw. So it is a certain volumetric measurement per person on the household members. And there are organizations connected, for example, to this Senate Academy. Dar al-Mustafa has the Ra'fa charitable organization. You can arrange to pay your zakat fitr in grain through that organization, and that is of benefit to the poor there in those areas. 36b, section 36b, it is incumbent once 3 conditions are fulfilled. So these are conditions for the obligation of paying zakat fitr. If one did not fulfill one of these conditions, zakat fitr would not be obligatory upon you. One, that one is Muslim, right? It's only due on Muslim persons in the home. And he translates that one grasps part of the day of Ramadan and part of the day of Shawwal, even if it be a moment each day. So what it means is someone is alive for a portion of Ramadan and a portion of the eve before Eid al-Fitr at least, right? So if someone were alive just before Maghrib on the last day of Ramadan and just after Maghrib on the eve of the Eid, zakat fitr will be due on them. So what does that exclude? That excludes a baby born on the eve before Eid al-Fitr or a person who dies on the last day of Ramadan. But a baby who's born at the very end of Ramadan or a person who dies or a baby is born at the very end of Ramadan, or zakat al-fitr is due upon them. Naam, la ilaha illallah. So you have to be alive for a portion of Ramadan and a portion of the first day of Shawwal, meaning even the first eve of Shawwal. Not someone who dies before the end of Ramadan or is born in the night before the Eid. 3, that the amount due is in excess of one's needs and the needs of one provides for on the day of Eid, also in excess of one's debts and housing expenditure. So what does this mean? This means that the person owns an excess of their minimum food for Eid and the following night, clothing for Eid and the following night, and housing and debts, right? So that means, for example, if someone owns a closet full of clothing or shoes, 10 pairs of shoes, and that's more than the bare minimum of clothing that a person needs, then they're going to owe zakat fitr. That's why I say it's obligatory upon the vast majority of us. So even someone who is faqir or miskeen, for example, someone who's poor or needy, and we're going to cover those two categories in a moment, that person, as long as they still have the basic food, clothing, shelter they need for this day and the following night, they're going to owe zakat fitr, even if the excess came from zakat fitr. And that comes in hadith. Someone might receive payment as zakat fitr, and it might be substantial. It might be grain that could last for weeks or months. And then from that which they received, they would have to pay out a little bit of zakat fitr for their family members. So with those 3 conditions, zakat fitr is due. Who is it due on? It's due on yourself and your monetary dependents. So, for example, myself, I'm a husband and father. I'm going to be obliged to pay it upon my wife and my children. Those are my monetary dependents. My wife is not obliged to pay it for herself. And adult children who have their own property, I'm not obliged to pay for them, though the head of the household can pay for them. And if he does, he should inform them and they give him permission, because it is an act of worship and requires an intention. So it should be with the permission of someone who is accountable and not just done on their behalf without their permission, though other schools of thought allow for that. That brings us to section 37C, which is our final section of zakat. The author, or more specifically the translator, may Allah reward him, says, zakat is only acceptable if paid to the 8 categories of people stated in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 60. So in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 60, Allah lists 8 categories who may receive zakat. And typically, we only encounter 4 or 5 of these categories in our locality. Your locality may differ. These are the poor, in Arabic, al-fuqara, and that is essentially someone who possesses less than half of their needs. Al-masakin, translated as the needy. Number 2 is the needy, in Arabic, masakin. That is someone who possesses more than half their needs. However, it doesn't suffice them. They have less than all that they need, but more than half of what they need. Zakat workers, and that is someone who is appointed by the Muslim ruler for the collection and distribution of zakat, and other workers associated with the zakat collection and distribution. They actually receive payment from the zakat itself. Those requiring reconciliation, al-mu'allafa qulubuhum, in reliance of the traveler, translated as those whose hearts are to be reconciled, and those are people with a weak intention in Islam, like a brand new Muslim, for example, that by receiving zakat, their heart is won over more and more, and they come closer to the faith and stronger in the faith. And there's a few categories that are mentioned for this type of person in the longer books. 5, one purchasing one's own freedom, and alhamdulillah, in the vast majority of localities in the world, this is no longer relevant. And essentially, those were slaves who have entered into an agreement with their masters called kitaba, where they are purchasing their freedom. And once they've engaged in that agreement, zakat can be used to emancipate them. And take as a rule of thumb in the Sharia, a maxim in the Sharia, a qaida, ash-shara' yatashawwaf lil-itq. The Sharia strives for emancipation. So one of the pathways to emancipation is actually zakat, enabling those that whose owners have given them an agreement to purchase their freedom. Zakat can be used and emancipate that person. 6, debtors, al-gharimin, those who have a permissible debt that's due and they're unable to repay it. Zakat can be used to repay their debt. They'll be given zakat to repay their debt. Those fighting jihad voluntarily, and that are those who are voluntarily without a stipend from the imam in actual combat on their own dime. They're paying their own transportation and so on. Zakat can be used to support this. 8, travelers in need of money, and that is a traveler who lacks the money, the funds for their trip. They can receive zakat for that. Zakat is only lawful and valid to a Muslim person from one of these 8 categories. And as you see, a number of these categories no longer exist or aren't relevant in our localities. We commonly will find in our localities poor, needy, those whose hearts are to be reconciled, those in debt, and travelers. And may Allah grant us to pay our zakat and pay it properly. If you pay your zakat through an organization, make sure that they understand these rulings and that your zakat is actually reaching a Muslim person from one of those 8 categories. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.